Hello, my name is Nathan Pigors, and this is 5 Things to Know About Descartes. By way of introduction, Descartes was a French philosopher and mathematician who lived in the first half of the 17th century. The first thing to know about Descartes is his most famous statement, cogito ergo sum, which is Latin for, I think, therefore I am. This is a really important statement to understanding Descartes' philosophy. His philosophy begins in doubt. If you read his Meditations on First Philosophy, perhaps his most influential work, he begins by doubting whether anything that you can doubt is true. This plays into his larger work for trying to find certainty, certain truth, and certain philosophical knowledge. At the same time, he's literally trying to replace Aristotle, the famous philosopher from the ancient world, and by using doubt and certainty as his criteria. And when he goes through his method and he doubts everything, the statement he arrives at to be the truth that he cannot doubt is, I think, therefore I am. Or in other versions, I doubt, therefore I am. The idea being that if he is the one doubting or he is the one thinking, then he cannot doubt that he is the one doing that. This leads to my second point, being that Descartes is the father of the Enlightenment. The light in Enlightenment refers to the light of reason. The idea of the Enlightenment is that we can use reason to understand and reorder reality. Descartes' focus on certainty led to this focus on reason, because they believed that reason was the road to certainty. This led people to try to rethink how we structure society. There's a lot of governmental changes that come out of the Enlightenment. This has led to restructuring how we understand the goal of human life, the focus on improving man's material lot, making individuals have more money and more things. This materialistic influence comes out of the Enlightenment. And this Enlightenment also focused on the individual, valuing the individual more than the community. It was also an Enlightenment value. This contrasted with pre-Enlightenment values, which emphasize the spiritual above the material, generally, and also emphasized that reason needed certain assumptions and truths to back it for reason to work. Whereas the Enlightenment focused on reason in the void, reason without any assumptions or anything supporting it. You can still see Enlightenment communities existing now after the Enlightenment in certain scientific and rationalistic groups, maybe atheistic groups, where people still operate as if you have to prove everything you say with evidence, but their evidence that they allow is only rationalistic data, right? So this is an Enlightenment leftovers that we still see today. Third, Descartes is the father of epistemology. Epistemology is one of the branches of philosophy, and it answers the question, how do I know what I know? Prior to Descartes, people still did sometimes ask that question, but everyone knew that you had to have certain assumptions and certain worldview assumptions to think well. But with Descartes, he tried to strip all of that away with his focus on doubt and say, what can I know for certain by myself without anything? This led philosophy in a new direction. Instead of trying to understand how to understand God and what he has made, this narrowed the focus on how I know what I know and what I can figure out, even using imperfect things like language. Future philosophers were very influenced by epistemology, include people like Kant with his categorical imperative, saying, how can we have ethics if we don't know necessarily what we know? This influenced Hume, who was very skeptical, much more skeptical than Descartes, and the rise of skepticism. And this also influenced Wittgenstein and the focus on language games and the question of, does language actually communicate meaning, and how do we know it does? And those kind of questions all flow from epistemology as a field. Fourth, another question that Descartes raised in his first book, Meditations on First Philosophy, was the question about how the mind relates to the body. This question is having wide impacts today in our world, in our culture today. But he began asking these questions in the 16 teens, trying to figure out with his focus on certainty and doubt, how can I know what I really am? And what the conclusion he came to is that I am a thinking thing. I am a thing that thinks. And therefore he identified his personality and who he was with his mind, and did not identify who he was and what he was with his body. This is a sharp break from the earlier tradition, which emphasized the idea that human being is a mind-body thing, and that the mind and the body are interrelated, and you cannot take either away, otherwise you will lose something essentially human. But interestingly, although he was materialist with his Enlightenment emphasis, he is anti-materialist with his emphasis on the mind. And he believed he could only know that he really was his mind. If you think about so many modern conceptions about science fiction and mind-body issues, including transgenderism, this all flows from his mind-body disruption, that there's a disrupted relationship between the mind and body. Fifth and last is Descartes' contribution to mathematics, actually. Descartes is one of the most influential mathematicians in history, and he's most influential because of his idea of the Cartesian plane, Cartes being his name in Latin, and it's named after him. The Cartesian plane is the XY plane that you use in mathematics to graph things in algebra. The story, the myth goes that he was sick in bed watching a fly fly in the corner of his room. And as he was watching it, he realized he could figure out where the fly was in space by measuring the distance from each of the three corners at any moment. And this led to his discovery of the Cartesian plane. But his influence on mathematics is much greater than that. Prior to Descartes, there were two major fields of mathematics, one of them being algebra, coming from Al-Jabr, coming from the Middle East, and geometry, coming from Greece and Rome. And these two fields were two different kinds of mathematics that didn't really have any way to communicate with each other. With the Cartesian plane, the XY plane, any equation, algebra equation, can become a shape. And any shape can become an algebra equation. And thus, algebra and geometry are put together by the Cartesian plane, which is one of the most influential moments in mathematical history. In review, the 5 things you need to know about Descartes are: I think, therefore I am. He's the father of the Enlightenment. He's the father of epistemology. He introduced the mind-body problem, and he created the Cartesian plane, which unified algebra and geometry. Thank you.